Chapter 10 and 11, Scenic Design. Objectives and Outcomes. Read chapters 10 and 11, watch the embedded videos, understand what scenic design is, why it's important, how to read a floor plan and its parts, the performance space and questions a designer must ask about its components, ways to visualize scenic representations, scenic elements utilized on and off stage, scenic construction and considerations, technical rehearsal process, page 159 to 161. First off, what is the show about? Costumes asks in regards to a play, when is it set? Scenic asks, what is the show about? What are the necessary things we need to get that point across visually? Look at page 134 to 136. And remember, scenic design has to tell a story, fit the genre of the play, and support the character's journey. And scenic designers also have to ask themselves, really, when is the play set? You're going to have different furniture and different style wallpaper and different embellishments on your set, depending on what time period it takes place in. Anyway, what is the show about? Scenic design is the art of addressing three things: space, color texture, and statement. What is the big picture? How can you, as a designer, achieve that? Space, the physical parameters of the playing space, outlines what can or cannot be done scenically and how the characters can act with the environment on stage. I'm going to talk about space in two ways. So there's space as in your actual theater space, which this is not what that is saying, but you need to take into consideration what your set could be like depending on where your set is going to be placed. You're not going to try to put like a huge musical with all these moving parts because you in a black box theater, because you don't have a fly system, so you can't take out pieces of scenery up and down, and you don't have room on the sides like you might in a proscenium theater to store extra props or furniture or anything like that. So you would not have that type of set in that type of space. And then also you can think about how you want to use the space. If it is, I'm just going to stick with black box. If it is a black box space and it's a living room play, which means it's just a play and it has the four walls and then you're looking through the fourth wall, which is imaginary, your actors would not come off of the platform if it's a one room type of scenic design play. So they're not going to step off of the platform. But then you can also decide if there are scenes that are outside, not in the apartment. Sometimes directors will take living room plays and you'll see like characters walk in front of the stage off of the platform, and then they walk through and then through the door. And when they're not on the platform, that means they're outside somewhere. They're no longer in that living room space. So the scenic designer with the director can kind of help think of that and like actually create the space the actors can and cannot be in. Next, you got to think about color and texture. Add to the emotional theme and journey of the play and characters. Painting techniques and material properties add to the theme and the concept. We are doing Little Shop of Horrors next year, maybe. It keeps getting moved. So, for instance, that show, Little Shop, is originally supposed to be a 1950s kind of play. In our version, we're still sticking with 1950s, 1960s, but a little bit more the 60s. So there's a lot of textures, and there's a drop that's going to be used on the stage, which it's like more colorful, like the 1960s when you think about like all of the groovy, like, I don't know, it's not hippie stuff, but like the color in that time period. So it has like rich colors, and the scenic designer, he found some paintings that he used as an inspiration, and so he used some of the painting techniques from that on his set because he wanted that to come through. And of course, this wouldn't be something that an audience member would just know. They don't know the painting that inspired him, but he had originally, like you guys did with your collages, he had some inspirational images, and a lot of times designers will take and run with those images and be like, this is the set, and they'll somehow put it in there. So you can figure out how color and texture help with that. And then statement, how humans fit into the world we are creating. And a lot of times, sets might not look like the way you think they would be. Like, I will show you a couple from my life. I did a play called The Late Wedding. It was honestly, it's been a while since I've thought about this play, but it was a play, and the original. And since it's been a while, I'm going to read you the exact link of what the play is about. So, Christopher Chen is a playwright, Bay Area local playwright, but his winking second person narrative, delivered by a 6-person shape-shifting cast, deftly guides you on a wild and delightful examination of love and longing. At once an anthropological tour through marriage customs, a spy thriller, and a sci-fi love story, the only thing you can expect from the inventive, mind-bending The Late Wedding is the unexpected. And then, boom, you can see my name. Very exciting. Anyway, but he does very, like, I guess, out there plays. Very cool, though. I always like to say. Not the point, though. The point is about the design. The design, like, from that, like, how would you design that set? Like, it doesn't tell you everything. If you think about it on, like, one level, you could be like, okay, these are about couples. So is it something like you're in a living room or different houses or different spaces? No, we did something different. It was like a weird modern masterful painting kind of thing. Like, the whole set was white, but it had different levels, and there were all these random items that were in it. Some of the props were set in that place, so you can just reach out and grab it. It was just very interesting, and even though it was about couples and their lives and different kinds of things, depending on where the actors were, could be in a different space, and the way the lighting was used, it helped transform it. So the set design was very abstract, just like the show, and it helped create a different type of narrative. And it's like, how did we fit in the actors into that space versus when we were in rehearsal blocking it. And for those who don't know, blocking is the path and the teaching, how the actors walk on stage. So you take a lot of time and you figure out the blocking of like what you move on this line and everything. So we would figure it out. And of course we didn't have a set with like different elements, like a window, which somebody climbed in a ladder in the back, or she's on top of a different level and sitting on it like it's her bedroom or whatever. So we didn't have all of that in rehearsal. So a lot of it was how once we got in the space and we like realized all of the things we got to play with, like we talked about them, it was figuring out how to put our actors in it. But the piece of the set itself was a statement and told its own story, which felt like it had nothing to do with the play in a way, but in some ways it did. Giving the show a look. Consider a list of adjectives to help you create the show's space. For example, should the set feel comfortable, academic, lived in? All of those give a different perception. If it's academic, you would think that maybe there'd be a desk on the set. Maybe there would be a whole bunch of books around. Maybe there'd be like a reading chair with a lamp. That looks academic, or at least that's what academic looks like to me. If it's lived in, does that mean the set is a little bit messy? A lot of times when you see theater sets, it's a living room, you just see a nice living room where everything looks like it should be in place. But maybe your character has clothing on the ground. Maybe it's like the type of, and like it's clothing that never touches. Maybe they decided that they have a lot of, it's comfortable, like it feels like there's a lot of like family elements into it. Maybe there's like a ton of pictures on the wall because there's some people who live like that and there's some people who don't. So you have to take into consideration what the type of the world, what you want your set to look like and how the world should be perceived. Will your set be made of painted muslin, carved from foam, wood, metal, etc.? And then muslin is commonly used fabric for drops and flats. I think I showed you a picture before, but I'll show you another one. So when you have your flats, which are made out of wood or metal, the muslin is a fabric that you paint or just project light on or whatever you want it to be, and you put it around the flat. And then a lot of these we talked about it in our material chapter. It depends on cost and like, would you want things to be metal that's heavier? It probably costs more. Wood doesn't cost as much. So things to think about. And then foam. I'll show you another example of a play that I did, which is also by the same playwright, Chris Chen. It was called the 100 Flowers Project, and they had a wall that was a puzzle piece, and like the idea was that it was all, I think, it wasn't put together in the beginning. It was one of, again, really meta. He does like a lot of interesting stuff, but it was a play about people putting on a play. Gotta love those. So they were in this rehearsal space where this wall in the back was in different pieces, and you saw these foam, they were foam pieces, but they were painted to look like concrete, and they were all around the room in the beginning. And then at the act break, my ASM and I had to put together the wall, and on the back of the styrofoam pieces, which again looked like concrete, it had different numbers, and I had a piece of paperwork that told me where each puzzle piece goes. So it was I had to put together the wall in like a 10-minute intermission, plus do a whole bunch of other stuff, I'm sure. This was like over a decade ago. So that was made out of foam. So if you want something cool like that, you would probably use foam. Okay. Consider texture and color. Coordinating texture and scenery and lighting. Something to think about is the glare. If you actually have glass on stage or like a mirror reflecting, a lot of times it needs to be dulled down. You use spray paint to help the glare because then the light won't catch it as much. Or a lot of time it has to be fake. It can't be like a real mirror. It's like just like a stick-on, like sticker or something. So it's not as intense as a mirror would be. So yeah, you gotta think about the bounce. If it's a lot of times when also with painting your set, you will seal your floor, and what seal means, like you'll put a clear coat on the floor so the paint won't get ruined. If you're moving scenery pieces or people are on it for a while, it's customary to put sealant on it. But a lot of times the seal, depending on what level of sealing, it could be really shiny, and depending on what you do, it might then reflect from the lighting. Especially if it's like a white floor and then you seal it, that's super bright, and then it also might bounce light. So that's what bounce means. It means when light gets hit off of it. And then you gotta think about the backlight. Coordinating texture and scenery and costumes. Color palettes should or can be related, not exact with each other. And I think, again, I've mentioned this before, if you have a green couch, you don't want somebody who's in a green dress sitting on that green couch, because then that person would disappear. So maybe it would be a green dress, and maybe it'd be a couch which has a pattern on it which has some green in it, and that character won't be completely lost. So again, I mentioned that theater is super collaborative. If different departments need to talk to one another, and the stage manager sends out rehearsal reports every night, and we'll talk about things. We'll be like, thank you for the green couch, and other departments should read the whole thing. So there could be a note for them somewhere else or something that might affect them that people might not think about. And we have production meetings every week where we talk about things. So then if there's a green couch that got bought, costumes will be like, oh, I was planning on having a green dress. And then maybe they change the color of the dress, or you reupholster the couch or something. Just communication, constantly. Survival guide to reading a floor plan. So here's an example of a floor plan. You could see a lot of times your Vectorworks is the program where scenic designers draw their scene designs. It used to be hand drafting, but now a lot of times hand drafting has definitely gone out of style, and people do it in Vectorworks, and they make digital designs. It's easier. And they always do something like this where they give you like letters, and then they say what those flats are for, or those platforms are for, and what's going on. So survival guide to reading a floor plan. Continued. Find the theater. Locate the solid built-in parts of the theater. Find the center line. The center line is an imaginary line down the center of the stage from upstage to downstage. Find major scenic elements, platforms and walls, above the slide head equals dashes, below the slice floor equals solid. Find the heights. Measure point starting from the real stage floor. Look for traffic pattern. How will the performers move around the stage? Look for doors and windows. Should indicate which ways they open. Reading a floor plan continued. Pay attention to masking. Masking, draperies or flats that hide backstage from the audience's view. Extreme sightlines, the seat in the auditorium that, by the nature of its location, has the best view of the backstage, used to determine masking requirements. Soft goods, a cloth-based drapery meant to conceal backstage. Look for moving scenery, rolling scenery for more than one position mark, flying scenery, only one position marked. Look for unusual stuff. Consider any other potential issue. This is where a three-dimensional scenic model is most helpful. It may visualize for you these other concerns. And a 3D model it's made out of little cardboard foam, and like that, they don't do it as much anymore, but scenic designers used to make them a lot. I actually haven't seen them at all in grad school, but people used to make the scenic 3D models so then it can help the director see everything. And then here's an example of a floor plan, and things are marked for you. So usually the back line is the backdrop, and a lot of times that could be the scrim. And then you have your platforms. The flats are the walls. You can see there's a door, and the door, it tells you which way it opens, because that's important for actors to know and for the director to know, because then you can start practicing that in rehearsal. A wagon is a moving set piece, so that set piece is some sort of platform that rolls on. Steps obviously look like steps, and steps would then go to a raised platform. The little squiggly lines are masking or legs, so that would be some of those soft fabrics. The portals are they're like the leg walls that come in. I'll show you a picture. The proscenium, so this ground plan that we're looking at is a proscenium. So you see the picture box concrete features of the theater, that would be right there. The plaster line is your fire line. So you have a fire curtain. All theaters are required to have a fire curtain because theaters used to catch on fire. They don't really anymore, but we still have them. So a fire curtain and it has to come in every night when you're done with the theater of the show, and it goes up when you're like ready to do the show and like let an audience in or start working in the space. But there's an emergency button that you hit, and it would customarily be a stage manager or an ASM who has to hit this button. And it just drops down. So if there's a fire on stage, the audience is safe. I mean, it sucks for everyone backstage, but I'm sure, yeah, there's exits backstage, but it's to separate the audience from the fire that would presumably happen on stage, because that's where the action is happening. And so usually with a plaster line, again, sorry, going back to it, you cannot have set pieces that are secured right there. So set piece will always be, that is placed, will either be in front of it or behind it. It can never be on the line because that curtain has to come in every night. And in case of an emergency, you can't have the curtain drop and there still be room for a fire to escape. Sorry, I got really into fire curtains for a second, but we need to know about it. But it's also, plaster line like is also the imaginary line that's where the proscenium arch starts. So there's everything behind it, and then everything in front of it is called an apron. Anywho, rant over. And then you see there's a mark for extreme sight lines. The person who's sitting way over here, stage, or audience right or house left, so it's house right and left, sorry. So they can see through the other side, through the wings. They're the people who will see everything. So that's why we have masking to help the people over here, which are usually cheap seats, but we still don't want them to see what's happening backstage. We cover it because those are the places you would see it. If you're sitting center stage, you're looking center stage and you can't really see all the things on the side. And then your center line is that imaginary line, which helps because you want your set to be even on both sides, presumably, but like also your actors want to know where they're feeding their center audience. Platforms, any horizontal playing surface. Regular platforms are 4 by 8. Other common rental sizes are 4 by 4, 4 by 6. Skin, the top of the platform where the actors stand. Usually the scene shop that you might be working with has this in stock. So usually we have a lot of platforms in stock. And then what they are, if you want them at different levels, they have different metal riser legs that go into them. So our platforms at UNLV, for instance, are not wooden. And so we don't build them for each show. We use platforms that we have in stock and then just adjust the level that it needs to be at. But a lot of times you do make these out of wood and you make them from scratch for your show. Coffin lockers, metal brackets embedded in the platforms that help lock two separate platforms together. A rake is a slanted stage to produce visibility or false perspective. And then the deck is a stage floor or temp floor on top of the permanent floor. Steps. Rise and run, the ratio of the stair height, the rise, and the stair width, the run. 18 inches is common. Common is an 8 inches rise and 10-inch run. Escape stairs, any staircase out of the audience view that is used to help the actors to get off stage. Flats, a flat is a vertical wall of scenery, common 4 by 8, 2 by 10, or 2 by 8. Adding bracing keeps the flat stable and attaches it to the floor. Drapes and drops. Drapes. A grand drape is the main curtain, like the red curtain you see in operas, or most theaters have them, like Grand Theaters have them, or proscenium theaters. A show drop. A front curtain designed especially for a particular production. A lot of times these can be painted or they could be printed because now we have the capability to print giant things. A fire curtain, we already know, I've talked about this, is a heavy fire-resistant curtain that seals off the stage in from the audience in an event of a fire. Tabs are vertical drapes just inside the proscenium that mask the performers in the wings. Show you pictures. Legs, drapes that hang to the side of the stage, hiding the backstage area, and teasers are the horizontal border that hides the first electric. Drops, a flat piece of fabric, generally painted, that forms a part of the scenery. A scrim, a drop that is either opaque or transparent, depending on how it is lit. Moving scenery, gripping, rolling, flying. Rolling, moving horizontally on wheels. Flying, moving vertically on cables. The JBT has counterweight fly system, and what counterweight fly system means is that if it is a 300-pound drop that's coming in or flying element, whatever it is, like piece of scenery, if it's 300 pounds, the ropes that I would be pulling or whomever would be pulling also need to have 300 pounds on it, so they cancel each other out, and then it's not like whomever's pulling the rope is pulling 300 pounds. It's like evenly distributed, so it's not that hard to pull. And then gripping, moving in any direction in the hands of the technician. And then there are some embedded videos for you guys to watch to describe scenery